we're talking about material handling challenges. And so the picture here on the right shows obviously a dough that is quite sticky. And so as new innovations happen with different dough types and everything else, in the end, you have to physically be able to, you know, move these products through some sort of a dynamic process. And so these are the things that I want to speak about with the group today. So Vantage Specialty Chemicals is an oleochemical company, basically meaning that we live in the natural fats and oils market. The food group is one of 4 groups that, as the picture here is highlighting, we kind of live in the material handling side and spray equipment side. So we make release agents that work to release consistently. Again, another thing that Lena spoke about, how to create consistency and everything else. So we make release agents and spray equipment to kind of razor blades, you know, help you make consistency in this industrial market. We also live in some of the emulsifier space where we make, you know, hydrated emulsifiers, but we also make a lot of base emulsifiers. We are part of, you know, 3 entities, Mallet Oils, which is about 80 years old, who makes oil-based release agents and stabilizers and emulsifiers, an Amarna company that makes some water-based release agents, and the other main company is a facility in Gurnee that's had many names along the way. It's been a BASF plant, it's been a Lambent Chemicals, Mazer, PPG Mazer, you might have known that, but it makes sorbitan esters, polysorbates, defoamers, lecithin offsets, etc. So we, the food group, kind of live in this ingredients and material handling space. So release agents really can kind of be broken down into two specific macro areas: oil-based release agents, which is by far the bigger space, and water-based release agents. And these oil-based release agents, you know, typically are formulated products that have some sort of lecithin and some cross-section of oils along the way. And in the spaces of pan breads and sweet goods and doughs and even tro and divider oils, we live in these spaces for more difficult release applications. In cakes and pastries, we would typically make something that looks more like a heavy grease, given the fact that it's a much more challenging release application. With our Amarna Coat blends, we make water-based release agents as well, and this fits into another range of areas. Again, bakery-wise, a lot of the artisanal breads and bagel-type products are used as direct application to some of these material handling surfaces. And we also live in some of these other dehydrated spaces like, you know, jerkies and dog treats and different types of ready-to-eat cereals. But in the end, release agents are food chemicals, and they're meant to create these separations and these required separations. So, you know, what really kind of determines release difficulty? And, you know, I like, again, as Lena was kind of, you know, leading us to before, you know, all these different types of doughs and different applications that we might deal with may be very sticky at some points and not sticky at others. And so we have to kind of understand, you know, the when and the where. And so we're really less about creating release agents and spray equipment, but more about kind of understanding the release challenges. And the main critical parameters there are just, you know, sugars and starches and proteins, and any kind of combination of those things. Those create this chemical desire for the foodstuffs to want to bond themselves to these carrying surfaces. And then further, as you look at it, it's, you know, it has a lot to do with kind of the integrity of the product or the shape of the product. Is it, you know, some sort of a sweet good that's shaped into some pan with, you know, a star shape or something like that? The challenge being that the more areas where these products can kind of grab hold of the surfaces, the more difficult the release and the more powerful release agent you might need. And then ultimately, a lot of these things are, you know, having some sort of a robust release where the product itself has to be structurally sound enough for you to flip a mold over and have the product release and or create some sort of suction. So, you know, product integrity is very critical from that standpoint. And then finally, it comes down to just the fact that the equipment itself, and obviously we've talked about the products before that, drives a lot of the release challenges, whether it's the temps that are being baked at and the humidities and retention times, but also, and very critically important, is at what temperature you're depanning a lot of these products. As things, heat and cool, they shrink and expand and do all sorts of different things. And so there are optimal times during this process where it makes sense to kind of depan things. So, and ultimately, again, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the surface condition of any sort of a pan, whether it's Teflon coated or glazed or whatever else, it makes a huge difference, because on a microscopic level, ultimately we talked about these sugars and starches enjoying kind of sticking to these surfaces, but the flatter the surface is on a microscopic level, the easier it is to be able to kind of remove that. And of course, further to that's just, any sort of cleaning conditions to make sure the pans are as clean as possible. So it's a really interesting thing. We walk into a lot of facilities and, talk to people about whether or not they have sticking issues. And a lot of people just really aren't significantly aware of this. I show this picture in the bottom to kind of give you a visual representation of a product in this yellow coming through an oven. And, part of it is actually making its way and kind of turning into kind of a finished product. But a lot of it is wanting to stick itself along the way to the bottom surfaces. And so you can see the buildup that might happen on the bottom of these areas. And so, people can't take these things for granted. And these material handling challenges are often just, people are just cleaning up and they're attacking these things in different ways. And so living with yield loss and things like that and throwing away profits aren't the logical way of doing it. So there are better ways of attacking these material handling challenges. And so I would just go back out to this group and say, yeah, if you have particular areas or operations, do take a good look and kind of determine whether or not you can audit your systems and help yourself out. So this is just a little further to kind of this last, these economic outputs of these things have everything to do with yield losses that we talked about, but contaminations kind of back and forth between different things. It creates line downtimes. It creates safety issues in some cases. If you are spraying oils and things like that, create issues. If you're not cooking things correctly, you may have to, increase your energy consumption, but ultimately it's a big impact on product quality and consistency. So release agent functionality is really, like I said before, release agents are food chemicals. And, they create these, molecular, binding on these structures. And I spoke a little bit about that. And they're really classified in kind of what sort of a film or what sort of a bonding layer that we create in between that. And so physical layers are the things most everybody is very, if we were to get up in the morning and a group of us were going to bake breads, we're going to oil a pan. Of course, we're going to do all the things to make our doughs and all that. But then we're either going to create some sort of a physical barrier, like with some sort of a parchment paper, like if we were going to make some different types of cupcakes or things like that. So we're just going to put some sort of barrier in between that. Mechanical layers, I spoke about and alluded to that before, whether there's some sort of surface treatment, some sort of coatings, whether it's Teflon or ceramics, etc. And oftentimes these are certainly used in industrial settings to create the best possible consistent release. But this is also a big source of cost over time, because as these materials get worn and or they're mistreated and not handled very easily inside of these industrial settings, you can damage those and have to go back through and do recoatings. The better way to attack this through these formulated release agents are having these reacted layers, and this comes in the form of lecithins and these different types of products, even monodiglycerides and polysorbates, these emulsifiers that can create this temporary polar bond where, part of the polar characteristics wants to kind of wet itself to the metal surface and the other wants to allow these small fingers to come up, so you can create very minimal surface contact. And so it's really this use of all of these different things that create a very powerful high performance release agent. But before any of this, I mean, this is a head nod to the equipment manufacturers. You really need to have equipment that's designed effectively, that has great mechanical devices and scrapers and doffers and brushes to keep the systems as clean as possible. And obviously the ovens and the different material handling applications need to be able to be optimized along the way. So partnering with the right OEM and the engineering groups to integrate these systems together is completely and absolutely critical. And that's a reason why in our space, we partner a lot with these equipment manufacturers and talk about, you know, what's the cross section of products that a company might have, and, you know, how that's going to impact conveyance. And so, and the last part of that I alluded to it before was just more about people understanding how these surface treatments in combinations with release agents can help create these consistent releases. So this is just a really basic example to talk about, you know, performance. Soybean oil as a release agent is very, very effective. And I've tried to show you relative importance, green being, yeah, this is very positive. And so as we look at this side and we talk about material cost and we talk about labeling concerns and overspray potential, this product, soybean oil, really sprays fairly effectively. It has, you know, a great cost in comparison to a more complicated release agent. And for the most part, unless you're concerned about GMOs, to which you could choose a canola or another oil, these are all very positive things. And from a product release standpoint, on the far left, it is a, you know, it's a very good release agent. The challenge is in an industrial setting, there's lots of things, you know, the smoke point of those is quite low. And so you're gonna, if you use a, you know, a basic product like this, you're gonna have smoky plant, you know, and, but moreover, you know, the residuals build up in the surface polymerization is the big thing that impacts and creates very, very costly. I mean, this is the difference between using a very basic release agent and a more formulated release agent like our Super P product. It's a combination of lecithin, a cross section of oils, and it's this combination that creates very, very good product release. On the far right, the material costs are more expensive. You know, you're adding, there's more to the process, there's more to the manufacturing process, but still a very strong, you know, from a labeling standpoint. The big things here is, you know, it's this residuals buildup. If you're doing one and done and we're baking some bread and we're getting done and we're cleaning this pan up and, you know, maybe starting the process over again, that's one thing. But in an industrial setting, you can't have buildup. You can't have smoky plants. It's just, you know, this is the reason for you to want to go to a more sophisticated release agent. So now once you've got this great release agent, you have to be able to create, you know, consistency beyond that. And so release success really just equals a good release agent that's formulated, it's consistent, a good piece of spray equipment that's maintained and functioning properly. And then it's in combination with well-trained operations personnel. We have a transient maintenance and engineering population, you know, in this last 20, 30 years, and that's made training an even more critical component of helping people kind of understand how to optimize, you know, what's going on. It's not, the analogy I use sometimes, it's like you're going to paint your house and it's the most beautiful paint, it's the most expensive paint possible, but the painter came in and did a very poor job and created streaks. To us, these places where it's not painted properly and streaky means that you're going to have sticking challenges. And so it's got to be this combination of one versus the other. So it's got to be designed effectively, you know, it's got to be consistent over time. You know, you got to have, in most all cases, this PLC control so you can control amounts and settings. And, you know, the more complex your bakery is, the more different runs, the more different products, the more changeovers you have, the more requirements there are for more control. You know, and today where, you know, it's always kind of been that way since we've been in this industrial revolution, If you make a bunch of bad product, in this case, maybe because, you know, they've run out of oil or there's some clogging issues, the ability for you to measure and, you know, look at micro pulses of fluid flow as it comes through means the difference between you making, you know, a very long period of time of bad bread versus, you know, you recognizing that there's a problem and getting an alert and being able to do that. Some of the adaptive sensing technology that we have helps us with that. Of course, it's got to be adjustable, you know, height adjustments, spray patterns, nozzle types, etc. And then it's got to be well supported along the way. Again, just another shout out, proper training and retraining of personnel is absolutely critical along the way. In conclusion, you know, big economic, lots of dollars and pounds and euros and reais and everything else. There's a lot of money that goes into people who don't have good control of sticking issues. And when people do have sticking issues, release agents and the equipment that surrounds it are equally as important as the dough, the yeast, even the water that goes into it, because you can't maneuver the product around and release it, then you don't have a viable production. Not all release agents are created equally. Again, you kind of have to choose the right formula for the right area to create the best benefit for your applications. And coverage, spray coverage should not be overlooked. Again, remember my challenge to go back into your facilities and audit your equipment and audit your applications and make sure people are trained for success. And then to, you know, to optimize application rates. More does not equal better. And in many cases with the release agents, applying way too much or way too little is more like a bell curve along the way. Too little means you're not going to have enough actives. Too much may mean that you're actually going to create a more sticky situation. And then finally, again, partnering with the right people who understand your equipment, getting the right equipment in place is your first line of defense. And having a combination of people who can provide that technical field support is absolutely critical to one's success.